closer.
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. We're going to have a packed agenda for our time with Representative Goodwin this morning. So it is a few minutes early, and that's okay because we're going to go through the introductions, and that takes a little bit, and I want us to have an opportunity to receive and to listen and to engage in feedback. I do want to offer just some housekeeping items to begin with. A reminder to you all that we are recording this session. It is something that is being streamed live on our YouTube channel, so be mindful of that. A reminder that in the handout, which were available on the lectern here at the back, there is our class covenant. These are notes that should be there to help guide us and frame our conversation as we are striving to build a constructive community of listening and engaging and respect. So I'll draw your attention to those and have you be mindful of that as we are here to be stretched, but to be stretched with care. A few things about our upcoming agenda and things that are ahead of us. Next Sunday is our mission fair. Here in the fellowship hall, we will not have the class that we've been in for the last 5 weeks, but what we will have are agents from all of our various mission partners that will be here in the fellowship hall, and our class assignment for next week is to come to the mission fair and to visit with each of the tables and to listen and consider the ways in which some of these missions may speak to your heart, your gifts, your calling. I want to say thank you to Reeve Hobby and the members of our outreach team. I'm looking around. I think it's just Reeve in here right now. And John Hoffner, and to say thank you. One of the big projects that they have done each year for the last several years is to produce and publish our Opportunities Service booklet, and that will be hot off the presses come next Sunday. And there are little descriptions about each of our ministries that we support or run ourselves and contact information on those. So those will be hot off the presses next Sunday, which we'll pass out. On the 23rd, and we're going to have a little scheduling something or other, I will make a decision this week whether or not we will host the Mission Lab on the 23rd, or I will bring in, I met someone this week. She is and I don't remember her title, but her role for Round Rock Independent School District is specifically to work with families in transition or families with students in public school who are not housed. And she shared this week that there are 1,200 students in our public education in Round Rock ISD that are homeless, and 100 of them are unaccompanied students, meaning they are still engaging and going to school, but they are not with their family. And so I am trying to figure out how to schedule her into our lineup. I think that as much as I know this congregation to have such a high value on public education and how much we've engaged with the schools around us, I think it would be important to have her come and to share with us some of the concerns from the district. And so excuse me while I try to make some finagling with our schedule in the weeks ahead. I do value our opportunity to work that we need to do in processing. So what I may do is send you either a survey or a questionnaire or some things for you to think about as we're beginning to process all that we've heard over the last month and transition from hearing from our elected officials into listening to our nonprofit workers here in the area. So with that, let us begin our time with prayer. Let us pray. God of justice and mercy, as we come together to learn and to act on behalf of our siblings experiencing homelessness, fill us with your wisdom, Open our eyes to see as you see, and our hands to serve as you call us to serve. May our time here honor your will and magnify your glory. Amen. In alignment with each of our various 7 points for our class covenant, I want us to introduce ourselves, and this week we're going to hone in on this question of respect, boundaries, and invitations. So as we go around, and Reeve, I know it's funny. Reeve, we'll start with you. We'll work our way down to Renato, to Patty, up in Serpentine, all the way around. And please say your name if you live in District 47, which is what our church is in. And if you are in District 47, then for the Texas State House of Representatives, then Vikki Goodwin is your elected official. Okay, so that's District 47. And I will have you just describe how you normally tell people what District 47 is, but it is wonky. Okay.
Oh, gosh. Well, if you can imagine a microscope kind of tilted, that's what my district looks like. It goes up from, where we are now, down through Steiner Ranch, through the Lake Travis area, but not Lakeway, down to Circle C, and then I live in Southwest Austin in Shady Hollow. So it's a very uniquely shaped district.
Big, wonky, and well, like a lot of districts, they aren't just like cookie cutter. That being said, so your name, if you're in District 47, and if you don't know, just say, I don't know. If you do know what district you are, say what district you're in, and then answer this question with one word. If you could politely decline one thing, what's the one thing you would politely decline? Okay? It's in the handout. I mean, you had a chance. All right, Reeve. And I'll just simply repeat the one word so that the people who are watching at home can hear.
Reeve hobby, in 47, homelessness.
You would politely decline homelessness.
I'm not sure I'm thinking that right.
That's okay. I was thinking asparagus. Okay, that's good. Okay, regret.
District 47, and I kind of like everything, so I haven't had enough time. I'd say broccoli.
Broccoli. Homelessness. Brussels sprouts. Math? Politely decline math. Okay. That's a new one for me.
I'm Jessica. I think I'm in District 47, and mine would be overtime.
Politely decline overtime.
I'm Colton Hendrick. I also don't think you live in District 47. I would politely decline busybodies.
Decline busybodies. Amen. Decline hospitalization.
John Upner, happily in District 47, and I would politely reject stress.
Reject stress.
Renato Reseal, I'm not in District 47, and I would reject cauliflower.
What was that? Cauliflower. Okay. Politely decline dieting.
I'd say divisiveness.
Divisiveness.
Julie Pratt, I am in District 47, and I would reject war.
War. Public speaking. Discrimination. Misinformation. Extremism.
Natalie Day, I'm in 47, and, wow, the first thing that came to mind was I would reject producing meeting minutes.
Producing meeting minutes. Touche.
AI.
Nursing Roma, I don't live in District 47. I would reject hatred.
Hatred.
I'm Carol Wada. I do live in 47, and I would decline and reject bigotry.
Bigotry. Liver.
Liver.
David Cook, I live in District 19, and I would politely decline snails.
Snails.
I'm Joan Cook, I'm in 19, and I would have to learn to say no thank you instead of, ooh, Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts. Okay. And and Josh Robinson, I'm not in District 6, and I think,
I knew what you meant.
thank you. I haven't had enough coffee. The thing that I would politely decline are house guests who've overstayed their welcome. Yes. It's hyphenated. It's hyphenated. And
And I do live in my district, and I have to say, what really got me was war. I would politely decline war. My son's in the Army, and so, like, let's stay at peace.
Wonderful. So, dear friends, we have been continuing in our series on homelessness, and today we have this incredible privilege of being able to visit with Representative Goodwin and to consider from her perspective in elected office and the ways in which she serves not only our district but our state, and how the concepts and the issues related to homelessness interface and interact with her work at the Capitol. I do note that because we are in legislative session, there is a lot that is demanding above the fold, front page headlines here on the Austin American Statesman and beyond. And I've asked Representative Goodwin if it's okay for us to take a little bit of time towards the end of our session today to talk about one of the other issues not related to homelessness, and especially something that has been really important, which is regarding school choice, school vouchers, et cetera. And there we have it.
Sounds like they want to hear about that, so
Okay.
absolutely.
So let's take military spending off the table then.
Okay.
And for those of you who do not live in the Leander Independent School District, and many of you know that half of our congregation is in District 47, the other half of our congregation is in District 136, which is Representative John Busey. Same thing for our school districts. Half of us are with Round Rock ISD, the other half are with Leander. And earlier this week, the word came out from the superintendent from Leander that they're facing a $34 million shortfall due to a lack in state funding, which is going to result in a high volume of program losses and even staff reductions. One of the things that we value in our community across the street from us is an international baccalaureate school, and 9/10 of a mile over from us at Anderson Mill is also an international baccalaureate, and Westwood High School being international baccalaureate. Well, all of the international baccalaureate schools in Leander ISD are going to be rolled out, come to a conclusion and phased out within the next 2 years. So I've asked if we could hollow just a little bit of time at the end of our discussion today to talk a little bit about things that are happening at state legislative session regarding school vouchers and school choice, and I think we are so honored to be able to hear some of your perspective and your encouragements to us on that matter. Some of you have gotten to know Representative Goodwin over the years, both in her community engagement as well as for her work through legislative sessions. We personally here at Hope have gotten to know her and her team through our drive-through flu clinic, and of which she has come and volunteered her time, her and her team. And one of the things that I've always admired about her was the first time that they did come and serve in our drive-through. Representative Goodwin wasn't wearing a name tag, and it wasn't like there were banners and yard signs saying, "Oh, look at me, I'm here to, show you what a nice elected official I am, and I'm going to stab you with a needle." But she and her crew were here serving our community just alongside with all the rest of us. And I really very much respect your humble approach in our community, and also your humble approach in representing us on a larger level, and for all that you have done for our community, continue to do, and wherever it is that God may lead you. We are so thankful for your service and having the courage, the strength and courage of being able to say, "Here I am, send me." And so, friends, let us welcome Representative Goodwin. And before we get into some, are there other items of introduction that you'd like to make about yourself?
Well, you just mentioned my getting out into the community, so I would like to just say I do have a monthly coffee. We try to do it in various parts of the community, in parts of the district, but once a month. And then we do a lot to get people engaged in coming to the Capitol. We've had 2 advocacy days so far. We just had one yesterday to try to teach people about the legislative process, because it is it's not very user-friendly. And so we want people to understand how you can best be an advocate to your representative, your senator, and to the legislature as a whole. So if you ever want to get more engaged, my office will gladly connect you to ways to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's jump into this idea about homelessness, and especially at this state level. From your vantage point, your experience, your expertise, what are things that you are witnessing with regard to homelessness in the state of Texas and in our community, in our district, and what have been some of the challenges that you have experienced with regard to attending to such a monolith as homelessness?
Yeah, just like so many things, it's become somewhat politicized. But I started out probably in 2018, 2019, doing a point-in-time count, and that's where we go out one early morning in January to try to count how many people are experiencing homelessness. That was very eye-opening. The constable down in South Austin, where I participated, Constable Stacy Suits, actually has one of his employees that keeps tabs on all the homeless camps. So they knew where people were camping out and living. And so I followed that over the years, and I think the most recent point-in-time count has shown that homelessness has increased. And so leadership in the state has said we need to address this issue, but they're somewhat empty words because the state of Texas puts very few dollars into addressing homelessness. And I think a lot of that actually comes from the federal government and just simply flows through the state, then is divvied up to the different cities and counties throughout the state. My first session, I remember hearing Governor Abbott really praising San Antonio for their work to address homelessness. They have a community called Haven for Hope. And so I thought, well, he's really bragged on it. I should go down there and see what this is all about. So we went and did a tour, and we understood what they were doing there. And I thought, what are we doing in Austin? So then I spent a number of months seeing how we were addressing homelessness in Austin. So I think the difference, really, I think both cities are addressing it as best they can. But in San Antonio, it's really consolidated into that one location, the Haven for Hope, whereas in Austin, there's so many different places where we're helping people in many different ways. And so we went to visit a number of them, like a lot of people experience homelessness because they've been in foster care. And so there's an organization that works with people who have just left foster care, and they have an apartment complex, and they have wraparound services. And they teach them how to write a resume, how to do a job interview. They help them get the clothing that they need to go on a job interview. So they really are working on that facet. There's obviously Community First Village. I've been out there a few times. And then the governor gave a piece of land, which if it's still called Camp Esperanza, it's out by the airport. And initially, it really was a very rough piece of land, which wasn't a good place for people to be sheltered. But that's what he gave, kind of to say, here's some land, y'all deal with it. And but now it's really turned into a very effective community run by the Other Ones Foundation, and it's the abbreviation is TOOF, TOOF, the Other Ones Foundation. And they have worked with people there to try to get them back on their feet. They have provided very tiny homes, and they help them with jobs. If they have a job off-site, they'll give them the transportation. So it's really taken off. But overall, there's a lot that's being done, and there's really a whole spectrum of need. But the state doesn't do its share, as in many different things. The state really doesn't do its share in helping with the situation. That was a very long answer, but I could also say that we know people become homeless because they get evicted, or because they have lost a job, or because they've been hospitalized. Some trauma typically is that first point. And we know that if we can keep people from that first night on the streets, we're going to be much more successful at keeping them from becoming homeless, if we can just keep them from being on the streets that first night. And so if we can work harder on how do we keep people from being evicted, how do we keep people from not being able to get through that tragedy, whether they are in the hospital or what have you, and honestly, how do we do better with addressing addiction issues? So it's not all addiction, it's not all eviction. It's a very broad, comprehensive problem that we need a broad, comprehensive solution to.
Cool, thank you. One of the areas that we haven't explored in this conversation, and I'm wondering if it's something that you might interface more in your role, is homelessness among veterans and those who had served previously in the military. And I ask that if you have any insight, or I feel like the experiences that I've noted is those tend to be a whole lot easier from federal monies and leadership to rally around and whatnot, where, as you were talking about, the investment of financial resources into issues of homelessness for non-military, for non-veterans, might be not as attended to or more scarce. What has been your experience with regard to homelessness and the military and the veterans?
Yeah, I think we give a lot of respect to our veterans, as we should, and so that seems to be an easier way to address the issue. I know former Mayor Adler had said that was number one priority, to make sure there were 0 homeless veterans. And so one of the things that he did was created a fund that if a landlord was willing to accept a veteran, maybe they didn't have a good rental history, but if they were to go ahead and accept them as a tenant, and if something happened, if they somehow damaged the property when they moved out but weren't able to, they didn't have enough deposit left for the landlord to fix it, there was this pot of money that they could draw from. That gave the landlord assurance that go ahead and accept this veteran who you might not otherwise, knowing that we're going to back you up if something happens. And so that was one thing, one small thing that helped. And I think,
What was that called?
you know, I don't know what the name of it was, but it was just giving landlords assurance that they wouldn't be out the money if something happened. I don't know if
Yeah,
it had a
do you
name.
know if that is something that's still around, or?
You know, I asked Mayor Watson recently, and I didn't get a clear answer on that, so I'm
Okay.
not sure if it's still around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I do remember that, and you're right. It has been a number of years ago, and COVID has come since then.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
there's a whole topsy-turvy issue related to everything in the world since Adler implemented that fund.
Yeah.
What are some things that you see as significant challenges to not only the elected officials, those who are entrusted in office, but also the citizenry, you know, folks who, you know, live on Elm Street? What are some of the challenges that you witness as for us to be able to address issues of homelessness? We all know that it's there. You know, everyone has the opportunity to gripe about it, to fuss about it, and yet, as you were saying, there are so few resources that come to support this multifaceted, wide approach that we have to take. What are some of those barriers that you've witnessed either in office or in your district or in the citizenry that really make it difficult to attend to these issues?
Well, honestly, I think it's because who comes to advocate for the homeless population, right? They don't have a loud voice in the Capitol. And there are so many issues that we're faced with. And so I think a lot of times, yes, it's brought up as we've got this big problem, but from the state level, oftentimes our leaders, Governor Abbott, et cetera, will point to the cities and say, y'all aren't addressing it. You know, it's kind of the blame game. Let's blame somebody else. It's somebody else's problem. You know, the population of people who are unhoused don't have a lot of advocates coming to the Capitol and saying, here's some real solutions. And I think that's the biggest problem. We have, oftentimes, I feel like our attention gets diverted on, like, just for example, the DEI issue. Like, why are we still talking about DEI and removing it? We've done so much damage already. Could we not move on from that issue? But that comes up with many members. And so on the one side, they're advocating for more changes with DEI, and our side is saying we have to fight that, right? And so that's taking our attention away from real world issues like people who are living without housing. So I think if we had more advocates coming, we also see rising housing prices, right? Housing has become unaffordable, and you will hear the governor saying we need to address the housing affordability issue. So that's one thing. Yes, we agree on that. That's great. Okay, now how are we going to address it? The governor's idea is we need to improve our permitting process. Okay, well, that might be one tiny piece of it, but there's other things we need to do. How do we put downward pressure on rent prices? You know, we're not going to get a rent cap in Texas, but I've come up with a way that we can put downward pressure. And that, you know, in Texas, oftentimes to get something done, you have to incentivize. You have to incentivize the right behavior. I don't always love that, but that's kind of how you get things done. In the Property Tax Relief Act that we passed, we had kind of an incentive for landlords. If you own a $5 million or less value property, you get an assessment cap on that property, kind of like if it's your homestead, you get that 10% cap, so that your property taxes shouldn't increase any more than 10% year over year. Well, most people aren't aware, but we gave that cap, but it's 20% for landlords with no strings attached. So my idea is, let's put a string on that. Let's say you only get an assessment cap if you are charging fair market rent or below, and fair market rent is already determined by HUD based on the idea you shouldn't spend more than 40% of your income on rent and utilities. And so my bill says, you know, a landlord would get an assessment cap of 10%, so it's real, it really makes a difference, if you charge fair market rent or below, and they have to review that every single year because it changes based on what the incomes are in a certain zip code. So that would be one way to put downward pressure. It's voluntary, so something that should be able to pass in Texas. And I've been talking to other members about that. The other thing I would like to do is Homes for Heroes program is already out there. It's a way to help our first responders to be able to get in, to be able to buy a home. It's down payment assistance. It's a program that keeps interest rates very low. And so that would help our first responders. I want to expand that to social workers too. That's might not address the homeless issue, but you know, there's a lot of different things that we have to do to try to put downward pressure on rent and housing prices, and you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, I think I could see with regard, I mean, the multi-benefit Homes for Heroes is job security, I mean, or at least workforce security, like they're not moving because rent, or they got priced out on rent, or they need to go to another place because of housing. And so I can see that being a wonderful, and to add social workers to that, you know, I think often another vocation in our society, woefully overlooked, and probably not as many advocates for as well. And I think that's great. The property tax relief bill, does that have a name? Does that have or a number, or how might we look up for more information on that?
So the Property Tax Relief Act passed already. The piece of it that addressed the landlords is a 3-year pilot program. So that will go away unless we pass a new law. And my part that I was explaining is the Fair Rent Incentive Act, House bill, and I'm terrible with the numbers, so I would have to get back to you on the number. But Fair Rent Incentive Act, and it's yeah, well,
I'll look it up. I mean, and the state legislative website to follow along with bills and acts and whatnot can be a little wonky, but the moment you figure it out, then it's much easier to follow along on how they're taking up issues, what they're discussing, how folks are voting, and all of that's public information through the website. And so I think that I want to encourage y'all to, as you find bills or acts or things that you really want to pay attention to not only follow those things through the process online, but if it becomes a moment where it's time to make a phone call and to advocate for something, this is what our elected officials are for. Within District 47, in the areas that you represent, have there been, what has been some of the responses of the residents that have voiced their opinions to you about issues related to homelessness? What would you describe? How would you describe the temperature of those residents in your district?
well, so every once in a while we'll get some communication saying people are unhappy with homeless people under the bridges, asking for money, that, when they are more visible, we will get complaints, but we have, through state law, made it so that cities can do sweeps and basically clean up any homeless encampments that are on the side of the road or under bridges. And so people don't see them quite as much. They become invisible again in some respects. The Sunshine Navigation Center down in South Austin, sometimes I will hear, even though that's not my district, it's close to my district, and sometimes I'll hear issues around that. But, you know, honestly, this is a church that's helping people who are unhoused, trying to help them, you know, get food and clothing and shelter and, you know, doing the good work. And so we don't get much communication. And again, you know, there's just not a lot of advocates, because I think they're trying to address the immediate needs of food, clothing, and shelter for their folks. And so it probably isn't top of mind to come to the Capitol and
Sure.
say, we need some help on this issue.
So one of the things that I've shared with this group is kind of 3 levels of engagement from folks who are really concerned, who have a compassionate heart. One is the rapid response, which is what you're talking about. Like, hey, let's rally up some food and restock it. You know, easy, low engagement, easy to accomplish, meets the needs. Then we talked about accompaniment, meaning how do we accompany those experiencing homelessness in a way the spotlight is on them and we're there to surround them and to build them up, which things like the Other Ones Foundation, the Sunrise or Sunshine Center, these are navigational to accompany them and helping them out. And then the third is what I call transformative acts of compassion. And that is, how do we change the system?
Yep.
And that's that part with what you're saying is what I'm learning today is there are very few persons advocating for that transformative issue and system of our state so that we can address this on a much larger scale. And that's one area that you've shared that is certainly new to me, and I'm kind of sad about that. I mean, I took a tour there on Thursday, and I'm taking a buddy of mine this coming Friday to tour the Capitol. And the first 7 years that I was here, I came in 2013, first 4 years I was here, almost every day I could be on the steps of the Capitol, and there would be a small group advocating for open carry Texas. And I mean, like every day I went down to the Capitol, there was always this group standing there with their signs. And then January 1st, 2017, when we became an open carry state, I never saw them anymore. But now there are different groups who are always there. And any day you go down there, especially during session, I mean, you don't know what kind of clown car this is going to be today. And I don't think that I ever realized that there weren't those who are advocating for issues of homelessness, which is prevalent in all areas of our state, from Amarillo, where I was born and raised, to Dallas, to Houston, to Odessa, El Paso, Abilene, Big Spring. It's all around our state, and I'm just really disappointed to hear that.
Yeah, I think most people understand that really the cities and counties are taking on much of the weight of
Sure.
handling it, and so maybe they probably feel like the legislature is a lost cause on this issue, which, you know, in a way it is. But I think it's important for all levels of government to work together. You know, we just saw, USAID being canceled. It really hurts my heart to think of all of the federal dollars that could dry up that come to our state that we send off to the cities and counties to deal with this issue. It's just, it's hard to wrap my head around what could come in the next few months.
Or not come.
Right.
Right, yeah, the impact, I mean, this is a major rock in a pond with a lot of ripples.
Yeah.
What are some things that, in your experience in service in office, that has really given you hope, whether it's through legislative work or just through getting to know your state and your district so well? What are some things that have really given you hope and inspired you on the issue of homelessness?
Well, like I said, there is so much work being done by Community First Village and the other one's foundation. There's lots of good work being done. We just need more of it. So the last time I went out to Community First Village, they were doing printed houses, which, you know, it was like, I can't even imagine how you print a house. But I went out and saw it, and it's, you know, less expensive. So really, there are people out there using their minds to come up with creative solutions. So that's what gives me hope. I will say that you brought up the part about seeing the people at the Capitol. And I think along with the work that you're doing, maybe that could be an assignment for your group to come to the Capitol. So another thing that gives me hope, not necessarily on this issue, but just in general in the legislature, it is a tough place for those of us in the minority party, right? Because people see this as such a Republican state. They think that everything that passes is by Republicans. But I've been able to get bills passed, and we've done that through people like yourselves coming to the Capitol and advocating. So 3 of the bills that I had last session were because families came and made the time to go visit with as many representatives and as many senators as would let them in their doors. And they also went to the lieutenant governor and the governor and said, here's the issue that we're advocating on, here's why, here's how it impacts me individually and personally. And that's what makes a difference, is the individual stories and hearing why this law would make a difference for people out there. One of the bills, we did have veterans come and testify in favor of it. It was around mental health, and the veterans came and said, this particular treatment has been successful for me with my PTSD. So telling those personal stories makes all the difference in the world. That's how we get legislation passed. A lot of what we need for the homeless situation is really money, dollars in the budget. But again, unless we know where do those dollars need to be, what's the line item, how can we direct those dollars to the right place? It's hard for us, even as legislators, to know where do we put our effort to make a difference. So we need people to come and tell us, hey, there's this program that's working. How can we get state dollars going to this program? And just kind of working through how do we get some solutions to these problems?
Yeah, what I feel like I hear you saying is a both and. It's both the personal stories and give us some direction, but it's also and the incentive programs, as you were talking about, and putting pressure on the downward pressure on the rent prices. And that's wonderful, and thank you for that. And one other question, I want to take a few questions from y'all. I think, did I hear you say earlier that you had done some advocacy training days? Is that right?
Yeah.
Are there any more of those that are coming up?
I'm sure we can always put together another one. You know, I just love having people come to the Capitol and learn more about the process. And so if there's a need for it, we can work on putting that together.
Great.
And also, I'll say there's a lot of organizations that do similar things. Like you brought up gun safety, and Moms Demand Action always has an advocacy day of their own. The PTA will have an advocacy day to advocate on school issues. So there are a lot of organizations that do the same thing.
Right. Texas Impact would be another. Equality Texas would be another.
Right.
There are several of those that are doing great advocacy training days. There's usually a mental health coalition that will do a training day as well that will, you know, kind of go through the process of here's how this works in this state, and here are the most professional ways to approach. Here's some, you know, multifaceted ways to have your voice heard. Let's take a couple of questions on issues related to homelessness, and then we'll pivot for just a moment. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Diane.
Since the homeless people don't actually have an address, do the people who are homeless, are they allowed to vote in elections?
I think so. I think they can use a postal office for their address, or there are ways that they can vote, yes.
Do you know if there is a language that have a postal box and actually can vote as well?
Well, like at Community First Village, they would be considered housed.
Trauma Center has a mail
Yeah.
So there are places, and so for those who
Yeah.
didn't hear, the question was, for those who are experiencing homelessness, don't have a mailing address, therefore would they be eligible to vote? And up here in our area, like the Charlie Center, which we've heard about as Mosaic Church, and Sunrise Center, which is in South Austin, those locations allow you to use their address for mailing, and also so that you can begin working on identification papers and other resource documents that you need as you're interfacing with the various different agencies in the state. Yes, and again, I'll repeat the question for those who are at home listening in, but also for the all who don't hear. Gloria?
Mailboxes, but also cell phones, because how are these people going to know what opportunities are there? And I recall there's a program at UT, the university, in the College of Pharmacy, who provides free cell phones to some of the homeless. And so that helps them get in contact with people that might be able to employ them or, house them, something like that. But it is a nice program, and I don't know how it's funded, but it is there in the College of Pharmacy.
So what Gloria had mentioned was, at least at one point in time, University of Texas Pharmacology School would offer free cell phones for the homeless. And I remember a mission trip that our church took back in the summer of 2014 to Fort Worth to work with the homeless. And some of our teens had questions of, well, if they're homeless, how is it that they have a cell phone nicer than mine? And what kind of cheap cell phones you can get at the grocery store or wherever, you can't help it. However, the cell phone has become the lifeline for not only for us, but it is the lifeline for how the folks in our neighborhoods are able to stay connected and have the opportunity to get those resources. I don't know if that has been replicated on a larger scale. Are you aware of anything like that?
I'm not aware. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's a good point.
Yeah, one of the things in charging stations, right, especially when we have coffee shops who are running folks out, you must be a paying customer in order to linger, and your lingering time has been limited to 25 minutes. Don't get me started on that. But one of the other things that we've heard recently is, in our conversations, is about having Narcan available and the grants that are available to make sure that those are out in the public for those who are experiencing a fentanyl overdose, and that is so commonly available that someone could be there with that resource as well, which I'm assuming is also something that is needed in across the state, not just here locally. Are you familiar with any of that?
Yeah, and we're still battling the other side not wanting harm reduction with the idea that you're opening the door to encouraging drug use. So we're still battling that whole argument. I mean,
Okay.
I felt like even last session, I thought they were going to allow the fentanyl test strips. Like everybody agreed with that, I felt. And then all of a sudden, that wasn't the case. This time again, I thought that we were moving in the direction of things like Narcan. And I know there is a bill that's been filed to allow for, test strips to be legalized, for Narcan to be widely distributed, but I don't know how far they'll get. Dan Patrick tends to be the blockade for many things.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's pivot in the time that we have remaining, and I have not provided us any kind of orientation or update. We haven't had the discussion here at the church at all related to school vouchers, school choice, and I know you could probably spend 4 hours on it all. So let's assume that maybe we have some common knowledge about that. And we would love to hear from you. Any thoughts that you have, any approaches, any kind of advisories to us to be on the lookout for, or any encouragements or calls to action you'd like to share with us?
So yeah, I will say, to try to put it very succinctly, SB2 is the voucher bill that passed through the Senate. It did get voted out. There was one Republican, Senator Nichols, who voted against it. And he wrote a statement that was put in the Journal, which is public, which I plan to spread widely. I will do that on social media, et cetera, because I think he makes all the same points that we as Democrats make about all the problems, particularly with that specific bill. And he calls it chance, not choice. So, well, with this program, there's a chance your child might be accepted by that private school that you want them to go to. It's not a choice, it's a chance. There's a chance that you as the parents might be able to make up the difference in cost, because many private schools are more expensive than the $10,000. There's a chance that you as a parent might be able to transport your child to the nearest private school, which could be tens of miles away. There's also, in his statement, he talks about this is unconstitutional, and that there's, in the Constitution, it says we are not to send public tax dollars to private religious organizations. And this would be giving public tax dollars to religious organizations. The schools, in many cases, are, private schools oftentimes are religious schools, particularly in rural areas. And not that I have anything against private school, but the idea is that it ultimately would take money out of our public schools, you know, and it could also destabilize our teacher retirement system. If you see more students moving from public to private, what's going to happen? You're going to have teachers that would have to shift with the students, right? And that would take teachers out of the teacher retirement system, so that's a problem. So on the school funding part, though, you know, we last session didn't pass the bill that would have sent billions of dollars to our public schools. I think every single school district in the state is running a deficit budget at this point in time, and so they're trying to figure out, well, we looked at the numbers really carefully. The school funding system is so incredibly, overly complex, but recapture, which is what the wealthier districts send to the state to send to less affluent areas, is only 5%. So if you look at the whole pie, the state's share is around 30%. The federal share right now is almost 20%. That's probably going to decrease, if not go away, I don't know. And then local share is the remainder. Recapture is 5% of the local share. So because the local property taxes are paying, whatever the remainder is, 55%, I believe. If you took that 5% and shifted it to the state and said, state, you make up the difference in the lower income areas, not our districts, which I think most of us agree we wouldn't mind sharing the wealth, but when our schools are having to cut teacher positions, are having to cut programs, are having to not able to provide what they need for our special ed students, they're not even able to meet the mandates of the safety and security bill that we passed last session. You know, when we can't meet our needs, it's unfair to ask us to send our dollars elsewhere. And at the same time, we don't know where they're going. We have no idea if they truly are going to lower income school districts or if they're just going into that big black bucket, which is the general fund, and used for other things. So there's a lot of us who have filed bills to increase the basic allotment, which would shift to the state more of the funding requirement, and it would, I'm filing a bill to say if we're gonna have our dollars going to private schools, in those years, we won't pay recapture. So.
What would, with regard to the issue of school vouchers, school choice, school chance, I'm going to use that vernacular now. The other part that you didn't say is there's a chance you could get your kid to school, there's a chance you could get in, there's a chance you can make it up, and there's a chance that the school won't let you stay and they can just kick you out. And you know, in a public school setting, you know, it's not, they're there to help you work with your child. They can't just kick you out. And no matter what they may or may not say, these private institutions, they can find easily a reason why you shouldn't be here, and have more freedom to do that than the public education. I'm curious, as there are some easily identifiable boogeyman issues related to why we should have school choice, like maybe there's more of a religious movement, and hey, we want to be able to do more of our own religious education, or the separation of one demographic from another demographic. What would you think has been your perspective, being in the legislative culture, as to why this is such a hotly driven item to defund public education and to go in this private route?
Well, I mean, if the vast majority of Texans don't want this, it really
Right.
does come down to a few people. The Jeff Yass, Tim Dunn, Ferris Wilkes, and Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes have a Christian church in Midland. They're actually spreading their church and schools to Arlington. Maybe their goal is to spread their version of Christianity, Christian nationalism, which is probably not your version
Right.
of Christianity. But I truly think it is driven by a few people. The millions of dollars that they have given to the governor to push this agenda. Even our rural representatives understand that public schools are the backbone of their community. That's where all the things happen. That's the biggest employer in some of these small towns. And they really care about their public schools, but they're under so much pressure from the governor, who's getting a lot of donations. So we need campaign finance reform. And I think across the aisle, that's something that a lot of us agree on as well. It's so frustrating when the majority of Texans agree on issues like this. I think the majority of Texans don't want vouchers. The majority of Texans think we should have some limit to campaign contributions. The majority of Texans think that we should do something to make our community safer, gun safety legislation. But we can't get those things done because of our political system, because of primaries and how few people turn out to primaries. One of my issues is allowing for citizen-led ballot initiatives where you could sign a petition. If you get enough signatures, you could put that up to a vote of the people. That's democracy. That's what we do at a local level. We don't have that allowance at the state level, but Senator Eckhart and I have filed bills to try to get that passed. It's something that would take probably a bit of time, but we're going to start some momentum towards that because the majority of Texans aren't getting what they want.
Yeah. Well, and I think full circle with regard to the importance of the institution of public education in a community, as far as for employment, but as far as also for a source of food. For the students who that's their meal of the day or 2 meals of the day is breakfast and lunch until the next day. And I think we all would rightly worry about the reduction in the funding and the impact it will have both on the quality of the food that is served and the availability of who can be served and how much that would be served. And I mean, those ripple effects are going to have such a critical impact on all of our communities. And I think you mentioned earlier, some of the homeless becoming invisible once again. I think some of what we've also learned in this process is that the pathway to chronic homelessness is invisible. From being housed to, as you mentioned, having a medical crisis that leaves you to couch surfing and couch surfing to the car. And these are all just things we don't see because they're happening behind the scenes. And the ever more need for our dependence on food programs and just having a place to have our kids go to be educated during the day while we regroup and et cetera. We just have a few minutes left. Are there any questions that any of you would like to ask? And Diane, hold on just a second. With regard to the school choice and school vouchers. Yeah, John?
How can we have a
Well, come to the Capitol, and we need a lot of people coming and really making, like if there were a T-shirt that showed, like, I don't know, choice with a little circle and the slash. So it's really obvious why people are there. The first day of session this year, the Republicans bussed in hundreds of people. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in the Capitol, all wearing red T-shirts that said, "Ban Democratic chairs." And so we knew immediately when we saw those red T-shirts who they were, what they were there for. You know, that makes an impression when there is a large group of people that are all obvious what they're there for, right? But even if it's not a huge number, there was a group a few sessions ago that were advocating, and they had a really funny T-shirt, but they all, maybe 10 of them wore this T-shirt, and it was a neighborhood issue, and the chairman of the committee even commented on it. You know, I forget what the slogan was, but it was a very catchy slogan. And so they could see that there's this group of people that really cares about it. That does make an impression on legislators. And I know sometimes we feel like no matter what we say or what we do, they're not listening to us. When there are numbers of people, it gets our attention, even on the other side of the issue. I think they need pressure. They're getting a lot of pressure from Governor Abbott, those Republicans that still support public schools. They are getting so much pressure from the other side. We have to put an equal amount of pressure saying our public schools need the support, and this voucher program, look at what's happened in other states. You know, it hasn't made our students any better off, and it's exploded the budget in Arizona. So really just coming to the Capitol, or flooding the email, the phones, whatever avenue works for you. You know, each person has what they're able and comfortable doing. Just do something.
Well, I appreciate what I heard you say is kind of overcome cynicism. And I think it's easy. I mean, it's hard to believe that kind of pressure works. And it is so refreshing to hear you say, believe in the system, but work the process, and thank you, because that's inspiring to know that a phone call. One of the advocacy programs I went to was, look, even if you make a phone call and you don't talk to anybody, those notes are taken down. And then those notes turn into statistics and they're added up. And that was inspiring to me to know that a letter helps, a phone call helps, your presence helps, and I appreciate also what you said, which is there's a wide variety of ways. And I think I mentioned that in the sermon, whether you're 3 or 90, every one of us still has something to contribute in this process. And I thank you for that. One last question, Carolyn.
First, a comment. I've been a retired teacher 30 years, and I taught at a neighborhood school here when
Anderson Mill.
I had parents wanting to tell me how to run a classroom. Then, X number of years later, that school became, because of apartments and this sort of thing, and packages toward this area, that same school became qualified for free and reduced lunches. And by then, I was out of the classroom, and I was, again, a reading teacher. And my job was paid through federal monies. And the idea, and I worked with children from moderate homes, and those, a number of them who were free and reduced lunches. And they would be the first ones to graduate from high school, hopefully get a scholarship of some means, but be able to go on, and it's looking forward rather than backwards.
And from what I know about Round Rock Independent School District, the position that you had, Carolyn Goebel was at Anderson Mill Elementary School for 30 years and in public education. And many within our congregation have been in public education. This one being 9/10 of a mile across the road, where you were, and the position that you retired out of because of lack of funding, those positions have been eliminated or restructured. So you may have been the reading aide, but now you would be a part-time PE and part-time art and part-time classroom assistant, just depending on where we could plug you in. So that position wouldn't be there that you had. The poor will always be with us are the words of Jesus, and his the way I've always interpreted that is not in a throw your hands up and be apathetic, but pace yourself, stay consistent, take care of yourself, and in the process of taking care of others, and know that in our lifetime we may not see it, but the good work we're doing is what also pays off in ways that we may never see. And I cannot imagine on a state level that you have had the impacts that you have made in the lives of so many you serve that you may never get a chance to see. And certainly whatever seeds you may have sown in us today, we are so grateful. Let us say thank you. So my watch tells me that there's a Super Bowl today, and there is an inferior team and one that will be victorious, and I am not going to comment again on the inferiority of the Chiefs, but I'll just simply say go sports ball. So have fun tonight. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you again for being here. Again, if you have joined us online, send me an email so that I know that you joined us and I can include you in the registry of attendance. Let's close with prayer. God of grace, thank you for the wisdom we shared together and the passion that you have stirred within us today. May our commitment to justice grow stronger, and may we walk from this place with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to advocate, ready to be your hands and your feet and your voice in the world. In the name of Jesus the Christ, we pray. Amen. Thank you, everybody.